Marcus Wellington dropped his briefcase. His hands were shaking, his legs wouldn't move, because right there in his dead wife's sunroom, his 3 sons were laughing. Not polite laughter, not forced laughter. Real, uncontrollable, belly-deep joy that he hadn't heard in 11 months. Ethan was screaming with delight. Lucas had tears running down his face. And Noah, sweet silent, Noah, who hadn't spoken more than 3 words since the funeral, was shouting faster, faster, while riding on the back of Grace Thompson, the black homemaker his mother-in-law had hired 5 weeks ago. A stranger. A woman he'd never even spoken to. And she had just done what all his money, all his doctors, all his desperate prayers could not do. She brought his sons back from the dead. Marcus Wellington, the man who controlled a $12 billion empire, stood frozen in his own doorway, completely powerless. Before we continue, subscribe to this channel and follow this story to the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me tell you how everything changed. The morning had started like every other morning for the past 11 months. Marcus woke up on the leather couch in his home office. He hadn't slept in his bedroom since Victoria died. The bed still had her pillow, still had the dent from her head, still smelled like the jasmine perfume she wore every day. He couldn't face it. His phone showed 17 missed calls, 8 from his CFO, 5 from his assistant, 4 from board members. He ignored them all. The shower was cold. He couldn't do warm anymore. Warm reminded him of her. By 6:15, his driver Samuel was waiting outside. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington." Marcus said nothing. He hadn't said good morning to anyone in 11 months. The drive to Wellington Tech took 40 minutes. Marcus spent every second staring out the window, seeing nothing, thinking about the same thing he always thought about. Victoria at the pharmacy, the drunk driver running the red light, the phone call from the hospital at 2 in the morning. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wellington. She didn't suffer." Didn't suffer, as if that made it better. At the office, his assistant Rebecca was already waiting with a tablet full of problems. "The board is demanding an emergency meeting. They're saying 2 o'clock, non-negotiable." Marcus kept walking. "Push it." "Sir, they're insisting. The Morrison acquisition is falling apart. Investors are pulling out. They're questioning whether you're still—" Marcus stopped, turned slowly. "Whether I'm still what's—" Rebecca swallowed hard. "Those are their words, not mine." "Say it." "Whether you're still capable of leading this company." The word hit Marcus like a bullet. Capable. He'd built this company from nothing. Started in a garage with 2 computers and a dream. Made every single one of those board members rich beyond their wildest imagination. And they were questioning whether he was capable. 2 o'clock, he said coldly. "I'll be there." The morning crawled. Meetings blurred together. Marcus sat through presentations without hearing a single word. His mind kept drifting to the same dark place. Victoria's face, the sound of her voice, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes. Gone. All of it gone. At 11:30, his phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor, his mother-in-law. "The new homemaker seems competent. Boy's still not eating well. Noah had another nightmare last night. Called for Victoria for 20 minutes. Marcus stared at the message until his vision blurred. 20 minutes. His 5-year-old son had called for his dead mother for 20 minutes. And where was Marcus at the office? Hiding. Running away from the only thing that mattered. He deleted the message and went back to pretending to work. The board meeting was brutal. Richard Covington, the CFO Marcus had hired 8 years ago, led the attack. "The stock is down 14% since the funeral. Investors are nervous. They're saying you've checked out." Marcus kept his voice flat. "I'm here, aren't I?" "Physically, yes. But when's the last time you actually led a meeting? When's the last time you made a decision that wasn't just damage control?" "I made a decision this morning. I decided not to fire you." Nervous laughter rippled around the table. Richard didn't laugh. "Marcus, I'm trying to help you. The company needs leadership. Real leadership. If you can't provide it, we need to discuss alternatives." Marcus stood up so fast his chair crashed against the wall. "Alternatives. You want to discuss alternatives." He leaned forward, both hands on the table. "I built this company. Every brick, every line of code, every dollar in every one of your bank accounts came from my vision, my work, my sacrifice. And now you want to discuss alternatives?" The room went silent. Marcus grabbed his briefcase. "This meeting is over." He was in his car before anyone could respond. Driving too fast, his hands shaking on the wheel. Alternatives. They wanted to replace him. Fine. Let them try. He'd burn the whole thing down before he let them take it from him. The gates of his estate swung open. The driveway stretched ahead, lined with oak trees Victoria had planted when they first bought the house. "We need roots, Marcus. This is our forever home." Forever. She'd promised him forever. He parked in the circular driveway and walked toward the front door, already planning his next move. He'd call his lawyer, draft a response to the board, show them exactly who they were dealing with. But the moment he stepped inside, everything changed. He heard it. Laughter. Marcus froze. His briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor with a thud. That sound. He knew that sound. He'd been dreaming about that sound for 11 months. His sons, laughing. He moved toward the sunroom, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The door was slightly open. Light was streaming through. He pushed it open. And what he saw stopped his heart. Grace Thompson, the homemaker, was on her hands and knees on the floor. She was pretending to be a horse, tossing her head, making ridiculous neighing sounds. And on her back, riding her like she was a wild stallion, were his 3 sons. Ethan was holding her shoulders, his face split into the biggest grin Marcus had ever seen. Lucas was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. And Noah. Sweet, silent, broken Noah. He had a jump rope around Grace's neck like reins and he was shouting, Giddy up faster!" Marcus couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. These were the same boys who woke up screaming every night, who barely ate, who had stopped playing, stopped talking, stopped being children. Dr. Foster had said it would take years. "Grief this deep doesn't heal quickly, Mr. Wellington. You need to be patient." But here they were, laughing, playing, alive. And it wasn't because of him. It wasn't because of the therapists or the specialists or the mountains of toys he'd bought trying to reach them. It was because of her. Then Grace looked up. Their eyes met. The laughter died instantly. Grace's face went pale. She froze her body, going rigid, fear flashing across her face. "Mr. Wellington?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't hear you come in. We were..." The boys went silent too. They slid off her back slowly, their smiles fading. And then they did something that broke Marcus's heart. They moved in front of her, all 3 of them, forming a tiny wall between Grace and their father. Noah grabbed her hand. "Daddy, please don't be mad at Grace." Lucas stepped forward. "She was just playing with us. She didn't do anything wrong." Ethan, the oldest by 3 minutes, looked Marcus directly in the eyes. "We asked her to play. It was our idea. Don't fire her." Don't fire her. His sons were begging him not to take away the only person who had made them happy in 11 months. Marcus's throat closed up. His eyes burned. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Grace scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking. "Mr. Wellington, I apologize. I know this isn't professional. I was hired to clean and cook, not to... I overstepped. If you want me to leave, I understand completely." Marcus looked at her, looked at his sons, looked at the fear in their eyes. And he realized with a clarity that cut like a knife that they were afraid of him. His own children were afraid of him. He managed one small nod. Then he turned and walked away before the tears came. He made it to his office before he broke. He closed the door, locked it, and sank to the floor with his back against the wall. And then he did something he hadn't done since the night Victoria died. He wept. Not quietly. Not with dignity. He wept with his whole body, great heaving sobs that tore through him like earthquakes. He wept for Victoria, for the life they'd planned, for the future that would never happen. He wept for his sons, for the childhood that had been stolen from them, for the father he'd failed to be, and he wept for himself, for the man he used to be before grief turned him into a ghost. An hour passed, maybe more. When the tears finally stopped, Marcus felt empty, hollow, but something else too. He pulled out his phone and opened the email his mother-in-law had sent when she hired Grace Thompson. He'd never actually read it. Just glanced at the subject line and moved on. Now he read every word. Grace Thompson, 28 years old. Previous employment with a family in Boston. References excellent. No college degree. And at the bottom had written in neat, careful letters, "I understand grief. I won't run from it." Marcus stared at those words for a very long time. Everyone ran from grief. His friends had stopped calling after the funeral. His business partners kept conversations strictly professional. Even his own parents visited less and less. But this woman had walked straight into the heaviest house in Palo Alto and made his children laugh. Who was she? That night, Marcus didn't sleep in his office. For the first time in 11 months, he walked upstairs to his son's bedroom. The door was slightly open. A nightlight cast soft shadows on the wall. All 3 boys were asleep in the same bed. They'd been doing that since Victoria died, holding on to each other through the nightmares. But tonight, something was different. They looked peaceful. No tears on their pillows. No tense little faces. Just 3 boys sleeping soundly, dreaming whatever dreams 5-year-olds dream. Marcus stood in the doorway watching them breathe, feeling something stir inside him that he thought was dead. Hope. The next morning he came downstairs at 6:30. Earlier than he needed to, earlier than he should have. He told himself it was because he had calls to make. That was a lie. He wanted to see her. Grace was already in the kitchen, moving with quiet efficiency. She was humming softly a song Marcus didn't recognize. She cracked eggs into a pan, poured juice into 3 small glasses decorated with cartoon dinosaurs, set out plates that Victoria had bought when the boys were 2. The boys came thundering in, still in their pajamas. Noah saw Grace first. His face lit up like the sun coming out. Grace, Grace, can we play horse again? Please, please, please? Grace turned from the stove, a warm smile spreading across her face. We'll see, sweetheart. First you need to eat your breakfast and... She saw Marcus. Her smile faltered. The warmth in her eyes cooled to uncertainty. Good morning, Mr. Wellington. I didn't realize you were home. Can I make you something? Just coffee. She nodded and reached for a mug, her movements suddenly careful, controlled. Lucas tugged on her shirt. Grace, you didn't answer. Can we play horse is daddy mad? He didn't yell at us yesterday. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Daddy didn't yell. That was the measure of success now. The fact that he hadn't yelled at his children. What kind of father had he become? Marcus, he said suddenly. Grace turned confused. I'm sorry. My name. Call me Marcus, not Mr. Wellington. She studied his face for a moment, looking for something. Then she nodded slowly. All right, Marcus. The name sounded strange coming from her. Intimate, but also right. Ethan had been watching the whole exchange with eyes that were too old for 5 years old. Daddy, are you going to work today? Yes. Are you coming home late again? Marcus hesitated. He always came home late. Late enough that the boys were asleep. Late enough that he didn't have to face them. Actually, he heard himself say, I might come home a little earlier today. All 3 boys stared at him in shock. Really? Noah whispered. Really? The boys looked at each other. Then Lucas turned back to Grace. Did you hear that Daddy's coming home early? Can we all play together? Grace looked at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He nodded once. After breakfast, Grace said, turning back to the stove. Now sit down and eat before your eggs get cold. They obeyed instantly. No arguments, no complaints. They just did what she said. Marcus sat at the far end of the table with his coffee watching. Grace served the boys with practiced ease. She cut Ethan's eggs without being asked. She reminded Lucas to use his fork. She wiped a spot of juice from Noah's chin with a gentle hand. She knew them. In 5 weeks she had learned things about his sons that Marcus should have known but didn't. The realization burned. After the boys finished eating, Grace sent them upstairs to get dressed. Brush your teeth too, she called after them. I'll come check. They ran up the stairs, their feet pounding on the hardwood, their voices echoing through the house. Noise, life, the things that had been missing for so long. Grace turned to Marcus, her shoulders tense. If this is about yesterday, I want to apologize again. I overstepped my bounds. I was hired to clean and cook, not to... I don't want an apology. She stopped. You don't... My sons laughed yesterday. For the first time in 11 months, they laughed. I've spent a fortune on therapists and specialists. None of them could do what you did. Grace was quiet for a moment. Mr. Marcus, your boys don't need more therapists. They just need someone to be present with them, someone who isn't afraid of their sadness. I don't know how to do that. The admission cost him everything. He could hear the crack in his own voice. They talk about their mother, Grace said softly. Every day. They tell me stories about her, what she smelled like, how she sang off key, how she let them have ice cream before dinner sometimes. Marcus's throat tightened. I didn't know that, because you change the subject every time her name comes up. They notice Marcus. They think talking about her makes you sad, so they stopped. The words hit him like a physical blow. His sons had stopped talking about their mother because of him, because they were trying to protect him from his own grief. How do you know all this? He asked. How do you know what they need? Something flickered in Grace's eyes, something deep and wounded, but it vanished before Marcus could name it. I just do, she said quietly. Before he could ask more, the boys came thundering back down the stairs. Grace, we're ready. We brushed our teeth and everything. Grace smiled at them. Good job. Now why don't you show your daddy those pictures you drew yesterday? The boys froze. They looked at Marcus with uncertainty, like they expected him to say no, like they expected him to leave. "I'd like to see them," Marcus said. Noah was the first to move. He walked over slowly, clutching a crumpled piece of paper to his chest. When he reached Marcus, he held it out with trembling hands. It was a crayon drawing. 4 stick figures in front of a house. 3 small figures, clearly the boys, and 1 larger figure with yellow hair and a triangle dress. "That's Mommy," Noah whispered. "She's watching us from heaven. Grace said it's okay to draw her." Marcus couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. "It's beautiful," he managed finally. "She would love it." Noah's face broke into a smile, real and bright and full of hope. And Marcus understood finally what Grace had been trying to tell him. His sons didn't need him to be strong. They needed him to be there. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus changed. He started coming home earlier. At first just by an hour, then 2 hours, then 3. By the end of the second week, he was walking through the door by 5 o'clock every day. He didn't join in the games at first. He watched from doorways, from windows, always on the outside looking in. But he was there, present for the first time in 11 months. Grace noticed everything. Of course she did. "You can come closer," she said one afternoon, looking up from the tower of blocks the boys were building around her. "They won't bite." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to interrupt." "You're not interrupting. You're their father." The words were simple, but they hit Marcus hard. When was the last time he had actually been their father? Not just a shadow in the same house, but a real present, participating father. Slowly, he walked into the room. Lucas looked up and grinned. "Daddy, come help. We're building a castle." Marcus lowered himself to the floor, feeling awkward, out of place. He picked up a block and stared at it. "Where does this go? On top, all 3 boys shouted. He placed it carefully. The tower wobbled, but held. The boys cheered like he'd just won an Olympic medal. Grace watched with a soft smile. But when she caught Marcus looking at her, she quickly turned away. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Marcus went looking for her. He found her in the library, curled up on the leather couch, a book in her lap. A single lamp cast warm light across her face. She looked up when he entered. "I didn't think you'd still be awake." "Couldn't sleep." He sat down across from her. The silence between them was comfortable, peaceful even. "What are you reading?" She held up the book. "Beloved, Toni Morrison." "Heavy for bedtime." "Heavy thoughts need heavy books." They sat quietly for a moment. Then Marcus spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why aren't you afraid of this house? Everyone else who's worked here couldn't handle it. They said the sadness was too heavy, but you act like it doesn't touch you." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "It touches me. Every day. I feel it in every room. But running from grief doesn't make it go away. It just means you carry it alone." There was something in her voice. Something that spoke of personal experience. "How do you know that?" She met his eyes, held them, then looked away. "Good night, Marcus." She left the room before he could ask anything else. Marcus sat alone, surrounded by Victoria's books, thinking about a woman who seemed to understand grief better than anyone he'd ever met. But it wasn't until 3 weeks later that he understood why. It was nearly 10 o'clock when Marcus got home. Another crisis at work, another fire to put out, another excuse to avoid his life. The house was quiet. The boys were long asleep. But as Marcus walked through the hallway, he heard something. Crying. Soft, broken sobs coming from the kitchen. He moved quietly, following the sound. When he reached the doorway, he stopped. Grace was sitting at the table, her back to him, her shoulders shaking. In her hands, she held something small. A silver locket open, catching the light from the overhead lamp. She was crying like someone whose heart had been shattered into a million pieces. Marcus knew that sound. He'd made that sound himself, alone in his office night after night. He should have walked away, should have given her privacy, but he didn't. "Grace?" She turned, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with shock. "Marcus!" She wiped her face frantically. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were home. Who's in the locket?" The question stopped her cold. She looked down at the silver chain in her hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Her name was Lily." "Was?" Marcus felt the word like a physical blow. "She died 3 years ago." Grace continued, her voice breaking. "Leukemia. She was 4 years old." Marcus crossed the room and sat down across from her, close enough to see the photo in the locket. A little girl with braided hair and bright eyes, holding a yellow flower, smiling at the camera. "Tell me about her." Grace looked up surprised. People didn't usually ask. People usually changed the subject, offered empty words, found reasons to leave. But Marcus didn't leave, so Grace told him. She told him about Lily's laugh, high and bright and infectious, about how she loved butterflies and yellow flowers and strawberry ice cream, about the 18 months of fighting, hoping, praying, about the morning Grace woke up and realized her daughter was gone. "My husband blamed me," Grace said, the words coming faster now. "He said I should have seen the symptoms earlier, pushed the doctors harder, done something, anything to save her. That's not fair?" No, it wasn't, but grief makes people do unfair things. We divorced 6 months after Lily died. He took everything, the house, her room, her clothes, her toys. Grace's voice cracked. "This locket is all I have left of her." Marcus reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I became a nanny because I don't know how to live without children's laughter," Grace whispered. "It's the only thing that makes the silence bearable. When I heard about your boys, about what they lost, I thought maybe I could help them. Maybe I could do for them what I couldn't do for Lily." Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. This woman had lost everything. Her daughter, her marriage, her entire life. And instead of breaking, instead of giving up, she had walked into his broken house and tried to put the pieces back together. "You're not just helping them," he said finally, his voice rough. "You're helping me too." Grace looked up at him. Tears were still streaming down her face, but something else was there too. Recognition. Understanding. "Does it get easier?" she whispered. "The missing—" Marcus thought about Victoria, about the empty side of the bed, about reaching for her every morning and finding nothing. "No," he said honestly, "but it changes. The missing becomes part of you, like a scar that never fully heals but stops hurting so much." Grace closed her eye. Fresh tears fell. She closed the locket slowly and pressed it against her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not looking away." "Thank you," Marcus said, "for showing up." They sat together in the kitchen for a long time, two broken people who had found each other in the wreckage. And Marcus realized something that terrified him and comforted him in equal measure. He wasn't alone anymore. Neither was she. The question now was what they were going to do about it. Because somewhere outside this kitchen, outside this house, outside this fragile bubble they'd created, the world was waiting. A world that would have a lot to say about a billionaire widower and the black woman who had brought his family back to life. A world that wouldn't understand. A world that would try to tear them apart. But sitting in that kitchen holding Grace's hand, watching her press her daughter's locket to her heart, Marcus made a decision. Let them try. He'd already lost everything once. He wasn't going to lose it again. 3 weeks had passed since the night in the kitchen. 3 weeks since Marcus held Grace's hand while she wept for her daughter. 3 weeks since he learned that the woman who saved his sons had been carrying her own unbearable loss. Everything was different now. Marcus came home by 4:30 every day. His board complained. His investors demanded meetings. His CFO Richard sent increasingly urgent emails about leadership and responsibility. Marcus ignored them all, because for the first time in nearly a year, his house felt like a home again. It was a Thursday afternoon when Eleanor Hartwell, his mother-in-law, called. Marcus was sitting in the playroom watching the boys build a Lego castle with Grace. Noah was explaining the design with more words than Marcus had heard him speak in months. Lucas was arguing about where the dragon should go. Ethan was carefully placing each piece with the precision of a surgeon. His phone buzzed. He stepped into the hallway to answer. "Marcus, we need to talk." Eleanor's voice was sharp, controlled, the voice she used when she was about to say something he wouldn't want to hear. "About what?" "About that woman you have living in my daughter's house." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "Her name is Grace, and it's my house, Eleanor. Victoria's house, Victoria's children, and I'm getting concerned about what I'm hearing." "What exactly are you hearing?" "That she's gotten very close to the boys, too close, that she's playing with them instead of cleaning, that she's taking over roles that aren't hers to take." Marcus leaned against the wall, his free hand curling into a fist. "She's doing exactly what I need her to do. The boys are happy. For the first time since Victoria died, they're actually happy." "Happy?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "My daughter has been dead for 11 months, and you're already letting another woman raise her children." "That's not what's happening." "Isn't it Margaret Thornton saw you all at the farmer's market last Saturday? You were pushing the cart. The boys were holding her hands. She said you looked like a family." Marcus closed his eye. He remembered that day. The boys had begged to go. Grace had suggested it might be good for them. And it had been. Lucas had picked out strawberries. Ethan had found a book about dinosaurs. Noah had held Grace's hand the entire time, smiling at strangers. It had been the best day Marcus had experienced in almost a year. "Eleanor, I understand you're grieving. We all are. But I won't apologize for letting my sons be happy." "I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to be careful. People are talking, Marcus, the wrong kind of people." "Let them talk." "You don't mean that." "I do." There was a long pause. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was different, colder. Victoria would be heartbroken to see this. The words hit Marcus like a knife. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't use her against me." "I'm not using anyone. I'm telling you the truth. My daughter trusted you to protect her children, to keep her memory alive, and instead you're letting them forget her." "They're not forgetting her. They talk about her every day. Grace makes sure of it." "Grace," Eleanor spat the name. "A stranger, a woman you've known for 6 weeks, and you're trusting her with my grandchildren." "She's earned that trust." "Has she? Or has she just figured out exactly what you need to hear?" Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. "This conversation is over." "Marcus, wait. I'm coming over tomorrow. I want to see my grandchildren, and I want to meet this woman who's apparently become so important to everyone." "Fine. Noon." He hung up before she could respond. When Marcus walked back into the playroom, Grace looked up immediately. She always noticed when something was wrong. "Everything okay?" "Fine, just my mother-in-law." Grace's expression shifted, understanding, caution. "She's coming tomorrow. She wants to meet you." Grace nodded slowly. "I figured she would eventually." The boys were too absorbed in their castle to notice the tension in the room. But Marcus noticed everything about Grace in that moment, the way her shoulders stiffened slightly, the way she kept her face calm even though worry flickered in her eyes. "She might not be welcoming," Marcus said carefully. "I understand. She's protecting Victoria's memory. That's her job. That doesn't mean you have to accept disrespect." Grace looked at him with those deep brown eyes that seemed to see everything. "I've handled worse than a grieving grandmother, Marcus. I'll be fine." But Marcus wasn't so sure. Eleanor arrived at exactly noon the next day. She was a tall woman, elegant in the way that old money produced. Silver hair, perfectly styled. Designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Eyes that could cut through steel. Marcus met her at the door. "Eleanor?" "Marcus?" She looked past him into the house. "Where are my grandchildren?" "In the kitchen. Grace is making them lunch." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line at the name. They walked to the kitchen together. Marcus could feel the tension radiating off his mother-in-law like heat from a furnace. The boys were seated at the table. Grace was at the stove plating sandwiches with the crusts cut off exactly the way each boy preferred. Ethan liked triangles. Lucas wanted squares. Noah insisted on no crusts at all. She knew them so well. "Grandma," Lucas spotted Eleanor first and jumped out of his chair. All 3 boys ran to her, wrapping their arms around her legs. Eleanor's face softened as she hugged them back. "My precious boys, I've missed you so much." "We missed you too, Grandma. Guess what Grace taught us how to make cookies yesterday?" Eleanor's eyes flickered to Grace, who had stopped plating to watch the reunion. "Did she?" "Yeah, chocolate chip. Daddy ate 5 of them." "4, Tunil," Marcus corrected. "I ate 4. Noah tugged on Eleanor's hand. "Come see our Lego castle, Grandma. It has a dragon and everything." "In a minute, sweetheart. First, I want to say hello to..." Eleanor paused, looking directly at Grace. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Grace wiped her hands on a towel and stepped forward. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Grace Thompson. It's nice to meet you." She extended her hand. Eleanor looked at it for a long moment before shaking it briefly. "I've heard a lot about you, Miss Thompson." "Grace, please." "Miss Thompson." Eleanor's voice was ice. "I understand you've become quite attached to my grandchildren." Marcus stepped forward. "Eleanor?" "It's all right, Marcus." Grace's voice was calm, steady. "Mrs. Hartwell, I love your grandchildren. I know that might be hard to hear, but it's the truth. They've been through something terrible and they're healing. That's all I'm trying to help with." Eleanor studied her for a long moment. "And what exactly qualifies you to help my grandchildren heal from losing their mother?" Marcus opened his mouth to intervene, but Grace spoke first. "Because I lost my daughter 3 years ago." The room went silent. Eleanor's eyes widened. Whatever she had expected, it wasn't this. She was 4 years old. Grace continued, her voice steady, even though Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly. Leukemia. So when I say I understand grief, I mean it. I know what it feels like to lose someone you love more than anything. I know what it feels like to wonder if you'll ever be happy again. Eleanor's face shifted. Something cracked in her armor. I didn't know. Most people don't. I don't share it easily, but you have a right to know who's taking care of your grandchildren. There was a long pause. Then Noah tugged on Eleanor's hand again. Grandma Grace makes the best pancakes, better than anyone, and she plays horse with us, and she doesn't get sad when we talk about Mommy. Eleanor looked down at her grandson, then back at Grace. I see. The tension in the room didn't disappear, but it shifted, softened around the edges. Perhaps we could talk more, Eleanor said finally. Later, after I spend some time with my grandchildren. Of course, Mrs. Hartwell. I'll give you privacy. Grace slipped out of the kitchen, leaving Marcus alone with Eleanor and the boys. Eleanor waited until Grace was gone before speaking. She lost a child. Yes? And you didn't think to mention that it wasn't my story to tell. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. She's different than I expected. What did you expect? Eleanor didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the boys. Now, show me this castle I've heard so much about. Later that afternoon, Marcus found Eleanor in Victoria's art studio. The door was open. She was standing in front of one of Victoria's paintings, a colorful abstract that she'd finished just weeks before she died. She was so talented, Eleanor said without turning around. So much of her life still ahead of her. Marcus stood beside her. I know. I look at those boys and I see her in everything they do. The way Ethan tilts his head when he's thinking, the way Lucas laughs, the way Noah gets quiet when he's overwhelmed. They have so much of her in them. Eleanor finally turned to face him. That woman, Grace? She's not what I expected. I know. I came here ready to hate her, ready to tell you to fire her, ready to protect my daughter's memory. And now, Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Now I don't know what to think. She lost her own child, Marcus. That kind of grief, it changes you, forever. I know it does. Is she helping them? Really helping them? Yes, in ways I couldn't, in ways no one else could. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Victoria would want them to be happy, that's all she ever wanted. I believe Grace is helping them get there. Then I suppose I have to accept that. Eleanor wiped her eyes. But Marcus, be careful. The world isn't kind to situations like this. People will talk, people will judge, and the boys might get caught in the crossfire. I'll protect them. From everyone, from everything you can't. No one can. Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Eleanor left that evening. She hugged the boys longer than usual. She shook Grace's hand again, and this time held it for more than a second. She didn't say much, but something had changed. A truce had been formed. But the peace didn't last. 2 weeks later, Mother's Day arrived. Marcus woke up that morning with a weight on his chest that felt like concrete. Last year, Victoria had been alive. The boys had made her cards with crayon scribbles and glitter glue. She'd cried happy tears and hung them on the refrigerator. This year, the refrigerator was empty. He planned to take the boys to the cemetery. They'd say a few words, leave some flowers, come home, just survive the day. But when he came downstairs at 9 o'clock, he heard voices in the playroom. Grace was sitting on the floor with the boys, surrounded by construction paper, crayons, markers, and glue sticks. They were making cards. Marcus stopped in the doorway. And then you write your name here, Grace was saying, pointing at the bottom of a piece of paper. So they know who it's from. Noah was hunched over his card, tongue sticking out in concentration. Lucas was scribbling furiously. Ethan was carefully drawing something with a brown crayon. They were making cards. For Mother's Day. Marcus's heart cracked. Of course Grace would help them do this. She understood what they needed. He stepped into the room. Noah saw him first. His face lit up. Daddy, look what we're making. He held up his card. Marcus expected to see Victoria's name, expected to see a card for their dead mother. But that's not what he saw. The card had a stick figure with brown skin and curly black hair, surrounded by hearts and flowers. Written in crooked letters at the top, for Grace, you make us smile. Marcus's breath caught. Lucas held up his card next. I love you, Grace, with 3 small stick figures holding hands with a larger one. Ethan showed his drawing, a woman on her hands and knees with 3 boys on her back, everyone laughing. They weren't making cards for Victoria. They were making cards for Grace. Marcus looked at Grace. Her face had gone pale. "I didn't ask them to do this," she said, quickly standing up. "I swear, I told them we should make cards for their mother. I said we could take them to the cemetery and—" "But we wanted to make one for you, too," Lucas interrupted. "Because you're like a mommy to us. You play with us and read to us and make us feel better when we're sad." Grace's eyes filled with tears. Marcus didn't know what to feel. Something twisted in his chest. Not anger. Something deeper. Something that felt like loss and relief tangled together in a knot he couldn't untie. Then Ethan held up another card. This one had angel wings and flowers. "We didn't forget, Mommy," Ethan said quietly. "We made her a card, too. We're going to put it on her special place at the cemetery. Grace said Mommy would like that." He turned the card around. Written in careful letters, "We miss you, Mommy. Love from Ethan, Lucas, and Noah." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. They hadn't forgotten Victoria. They'd just made room for someone else. Noah tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, can Grace come with us to see Mommy?" Marcus looked at Grace. She was already shaking her head. "No, sweetheart. That's private. That's for your family." "But you are family," Noah said simply. The words hung in the air like something sacred. Marcus should have said no. Taking Grace to Victoria's grave felt like crossing a line, like betraying something precious. But his sons were looking at him with those eyes, full of hope, full of need. And Grace was standing there, tears streaming down her face, terrified that she'd ruined everything. "If she wants to come," Marcus heard himself say, "she can." Grace stared at him. "Marcus, are you sure?" No, he wasn't sure about anything anymore, but he nodded anyway. An hour later, they stood together at Victoria's grave. Marcus, Grace, and 3 little boys who didn't understand why love had to be so complicated. The cemetery was quiet. Early May sunshine filtered through the oak trees. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. The boys placed their angel card on the headstone carefully. They stepped back and stood in a row, solemn and still. Then Noah reached for Grace's hand. "Tell Mommy you're nice," he whispered. "She'll want to know who's taking care of us." Grace looked at Marcus. He nodded once. She knelt in front of the headstone, her legs shaking, tears already falling. "Hi, Victoria. I know we never met, but I want you to know I love your boys so much. I'm not trying to take your place. No one could ever do that. I couldn't help loving them. They're so special. You must have been an amazing mother." Marcus's throat closed up. Ethan stepped forward. He put his small hand on Grace's shoulder. "It's okay, Grace. Mommy doesn't mind. She's in heaven now. She just wants us to be happy." Lucas nodded. "And we're happy with you." Noah wrapped his arms around Grace's neck from behind. "We love you, Grace. Mommy loves you too. I can feel it." Grace broke down completely. She pulled all 3 boys into her arms and held them while she sobbed. And the boys held her back, patting her hair, telling her it was okay. Marcus watched the scene, his eyes burning. Victoria had been gone for almost a year, and in that time he'd been so consumed by his own grief that he'd almost forgotten how to love. But these 3 little boys hadn't forgotten. And somehow they'd found someone else to love. Someone who needed them just as much as they needed her. Marcus walked forward and put his hand on Grace's shoulder. She looked up at him, her face wet with tears. Something passed between them in that moment. Something that went beyond words. Beyond explanation, understanding, gratitude. And something else. Something that scared Marcus more than anything had scared him has taken him in a very long time. Because standing in that cemetery watching Grace hold his sons, he realized the truth. He wasn't just grateful for her, he was falling for her. The drive home from the cemetery was quiet. The boys fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from emotion. Grace stared out the window, her locket clutched in her hand. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing. What was happening to him? Victoria had only been gone for 11 months. Was it too soon to feel something for someone else? Was it wrong? And what about Grace? She'd lost her daughter. She was healing just like he was. Was it fair to complicate things with feelings that might not even be real? Maybe it was just gratitude. Maybe he was confusing thankfulness with something deeper. But when Grace turned to look at him, her eyes soft and warm and full of something he was afraid to name, Marcus knew the truth. This wasn't just gratitude, and that meant everything was about to get much more complicated. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Marcus was in his office at Wellington Tech when Rebecca knocked on his door. "There's a call for you, line 2, it's Mrs. Camille Whitworth." Marcus frowned. Camille Whitworth was the wife of Preston Whitworth, one of his biggest investors. She served on 3 charity boards and knew everyone in Silicon Valley society. She was also the biggest gossip in Palo Alto. Put her through. Marcus picked up the phone. Camille, this is unexpected. Marcus, darling. Her voice was honey over poison. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. We've all been so worried about you. I'm doing fine. The boys are doing well. Are they? That's wonderful to hear. Preston mentioned you've been coming to the office less frequently these days, spending more time at home. My sons need me. Of course they do, and it's so lovely that you have help. What's her name again? The new girl. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Her name is Grace. Yes, Grace. Such a pretty name. I saw photos of you all at the farmer's market. The boys looked so happy. She seems very attentive. Marcus knew exactly what she was implying. She's excellent at her job. I'm sure she is. Camille paused. I do hope you're being careful, Marcus. People talk, you know, and not everyone is as understanding as I am. What exactly are people saying, Camille? Oh, nothing concrete, just observations. A widower, a young woman, 3 impressionable children. You know how it looks. I know how it is, which is all that matters. Of course, darling. I'm just looking out for you. You've been through so much. The last thing you need is a scandal. There's no scandal. Not yet, Camille's voice sharpened. But these things have a way of snowballing. One photo here, a comment there. Before you know it, you're on the cover of every tabloid from here to New York. I appreciate your concern, Camille, but I have everything under control. I hope so, Marcus, for everyone's sake. She hung up before he could respond. Marcus sat in his office for a long time after that call, staring at nothing. People were talking. He'd known they would be eventually, but hearing it from Camille made it real. He thought about Grace, about her gentle hands and kind eyes, about the way she laughed with his sons, about the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching, and he thought about what the world would say, what they would assume, what they would try to do. A black woman, a white billionaire, 3 young children. The headlines wrote themselves. Marcus picked up his phone and called his lawyer. Andrew, it's Marcus Wellington. I need to talk to you about something. Something sensitive. What's going on? I need to know my legal options. If someone tries to make accusations, if someone tries to take my children. There was a pause. Marcus, what exactly are you dealing with? Nothing yet, but I want to be prepared. Can you come by the house tonight? There's someone I want you to meet. That evening, Andrew Chen sat in Marcus's living room reviewing documents Marcus had never thought he'd need. Grace sat beside Marcus on the couch. The boys were upstairs, already asleep. So let me make sure I understand, Andrew said, looking up from his notes. You want to ensure that if anyone challenges your custody of the children, you're protected, and you want to make sure Miss Thompson's employment is legally airtight. Yes. May I ask why has something happened? Marcus and Grace exchanged a look. Not yet, Marcus said, but people are starting to talk. I want to be ready. Andrew nodded slowly. He looked at Grace. Miss Thompson, I need to ask you some questions. They might be personal. That's fine. Have you ever been arrested? No. Any history of drug use? No. Any mental health issues I should know about? Grace hesitated. I saw a therapist for 2 years after my daughter died. Grief counseling. Andrew wrote something down. That's actually good. It shows you sought help when you needed it. He continued asking questions for another hour, about Grace's background, her previous employment, her divorce, her daughter. Grace answered everything honestly, even when it hurt. When it was finally over, Andrew closed his notebook. All right, based on what you've told me, I don't see any red flags. Miss Thompson's record is clean, her employment is standard. If anyone tries to make trouble, we have plenty of documentation to push back. What about custody? Marcus asked. Your custody of the children is not in question. You're their father. Unless someone can prove abuse or neglect, no court in California will take them from you. And if someone claims there's an inappropriate relationship, Andrew looked at both of them carefully. Is there? Marcus felt Grace tense beside him. No, he said firmly. There's not. Andrew studied them for a long moment. Then we're fine. But Marcus, I have to be honest with you. If people want to make trouble, they'll find a way. The best defense is a clean offense. Keep everything professional. Document everything. And whatever you do, don't give them ammunition. After Andrew left, Marcus and Grace sat in silence. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that felt like it was waiting for something. I'm sorry, Huck, Grace said finally. Marcus turned to look at her. For what? For causing problems. For making your life more complicated. You haven't caused anything. People who gossip about things they don't understand cause problems, not you. Grace shook her head. You don't get it, Marcus. I've been through this before. Not exactly like this, but I know how the world works. A black woman in a white man's house, taking care of his children. People will assume the worst. They always do. I don't care what people assume. You should. Your sons could be affected. Your business could be affected. Everything you've built means nothing if I lose my family. Grace looked at him sharply. What did you say? Marcus realized what he'd said, what he'd implied. Family. He'd called her family. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Grace, Marcus stopped, started again. These past 2 months you've become more than an employee to me, more than a nanny. You've become essential to my sons, to this house. He paused. To me? Grace's eyes glistened with tears. Marcus, you don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. No, you don't. You're grateful. You're lonely. You're looking for someone to fill the hole Victoria left. That's not the same thing as what? Grace stood up abruptly, walked to the window. Her back was to him, her shoulders tense. I can't be her replacement, Marcus. I won't be. I'm not asking you to be. Then what are you asking? Marcus stood up too. He walked toward her slowly, stopped close enough to touch her, but didn't. I'm asking you to stay. Whatever happens, whatever people say, I'm asking you not to leave. Grace turned around. They were inches apart now. Why? She whispered. Because my sons need you. Because this house needs you. Marcus paused. Because I need you. Tears spilled down Grace's face. Marcus, this is dangerous. People will try to destroy us. Let them try. You could lose everything. I already lost everything once. I survived. I'll survive again if I have to. Grace stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that changed everything. She reached out and took his hand. I'll stay, she whispered. But we have to be careful, for the boys' sake. Agreed. And we can't cross lines. Not yet. Not until we know for sure what this is. Marcus nodded. I understand. They stood there holding hands in the quiet living room, two broken people who had found something fragile and precious in the wreckage of their lives. Neither of them knew what was coming. But somewhere across town in a country club dining room, Camille Whitworth was having dinner with 3 other society women, and she was showing them a photograph on her phone. Marcus Wellington and his black homemaker at the cemetery on Mother's Day. The woman kneeling at Victoria's grave, the children hugging her. And Marcus standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder looking at her like she was the only woman in the world. She's been there less than 2 months, Camille said, her voice dripping with false concern. And already she's replacing Victoria, at her own grave no less. The women shook their heads, clucked their tongues, exchanged knowing looks. Someone should do something, one of them said. Someone should protect those poor children, another agreed. Camille smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Don't worry, ladies, I have a few ideas. The storm was coming, and Marcus and Grace had no idea how bad it was going to get. The first attack came exactly 1 week later. It was a Tuesday morning. Marcus was in the kitchen with Grace and the boys eating breakfast like they did every morning now. Lucas was telling a story about a dream he'd had. Noah was laughing at his brother's wild hand gestures. Ethan was carefully arranging his scrambled eggs into a smiley face. Normal, happy, the kind of morning Marcus had stopped believing was possible. Then his phone rang. The caller ID showed Hartwell Academy, the private school where he'd enrolled the triplets for kindergarten in the fall. Marcus stepped away from the table to answer. Mr. Wellington, this is Dr. Patricia Morrison, headmistress of Hartwell Academy. Dr. Morrison, what can I do for you? There was a pause, the kind of pause that comes before bad news. I'm afraid we need to discuss your son's enrollment. Would you be able to come in this afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? Marcus frowned. Is there a problem? It's best if we discuss this in person. Mr. Wellington. Tell me now. Another pause. Longer this time. We've received some concerns from other parents about your family situation. Marcus's blood went cold. What kind of concerns? I'd really prefer to discuss this in person. And I'd prefer to know right now what you're accusing my family of. Dr. Morrison sighed. Mr. Wellington, there are photos circulating of you and your Homemaker, at your wife's gravesite with your children, some parents feel the situation is inappropriate. They're worried about the influence on their own children. Marcus gripped the phone so hard he thought it might shatter. Let me make sure I understand. You're calling to tell me that my sons might not be welcome at your school because of photographs of us visiting their mother's grave. It's more complicated than that. No, it's exactly that simple. Some people saw a black woman with my white children and decided to make assumptions. And now you're calling to tell me those assumptions might affect my son's education. Mr. Wellington, please, I'm trying to help you. Then tell those parents to mind their own business. And tell yourself that if my sons aren't welcome at Hartwell, then Hartwell doesn't deserve them. He hung up before she could respond. When Marcus turned around, Grace was standing in the doorway. Her face was pale. She'd heard everything. Marcus? Don't. His voice came out harsher than he intended. Don't apologize. Don't say you're sorry. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? No, this is the fault of small-minded people who have nothing better to do than destroy other people's happiness. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Your sons just lost their spot in the best school in California. Because of me. They lost their spot because of bigotry. There's a difference. The boys had stopped eating. They were watching their father with wide, worried eyes. Daddy? Noah's voice was small. Why are you angry? Marcus forced himself to take a breath, to unclench his fists, to soften his voice. I'm not angry at you, buddy. I'm just dealing with some grown-up stuff. Is it about the school? Ethan asked. He was always the most perceptive. We heard you say something about school. Marcus walked back to the table and knelt beside his sons. Listen to me, all three of you. There are some people in the world who don't understand our family. They see things differently than we do, and sometimes those people make decisions that aren't fair. Like what? Lucas asked. Like saying you can't go to a certain school, but here's the thing. There are lots of schools, better schools, schools that will be happy to have three amazing boys like you, so we're going to find one of those instead, okay? The boys nodded slowly, not fully understanding but trusting their father. Marcus looked up at Grace. She was still standing in the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face. This isn't over, he said quietly. Not even close. But it was just beginning. 3 days later, the article appeared. Marcus's assistant, Rebecca, called him at 7 in the morning, her voice shaking. Mr. Wellington, you need to see something right now. What is it? The Silicon Valley Observer, their website, the Society section. Marcus pulled up the site on his phone. The headline hit him like a punch to the stomach. Billionaire widower's new family, a love story or something more sinister. Below the headline was the photograph from the cemetery, Grace kneeling at Victoria's grave, the boys hugging her, Marcus with his hand on her shoulder, and next to it another photograph, one he'd never seen before. Marcus and Grace in the library sitting close together deep in conversation. It looked intimate. It looked like exactly what the gossips wanted it to look like. Someone had been watching them. Someone had been taking pictures through the windows of his own home. Marcus read the article with growing rage. Sources close to the family report that the homemaker Grace Thompson, 28, has become unusually close to the Wellington children in the weeks since their mother's tragic death. While some praise her dedication, others question whether the relationship has crossed professional boundaries. The children reportedly call her Grace rather than Miss Thompson, and she has been seen accompanying the family on outings typically reserved for family members. Most troubling to some observers is the incident at Victoria Wellington's gravesite on Mother's Day, where Thompson was photographed kneeling at the headstone while the children embraced her. It's heartbreaking, says one source who requested anonymity. Those poor children have been manipulated by a woman who's clearly after their father's fortune. Someone needs to protect them. Marcus stopped reading. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. Someone needs to protect them. Those words echoed in his head like a death sentence. He knew what they meant. He knew what was coming. Child Protective Services. He called Andrew immediately. I saw it, Andrew said before Marcus could speak. I'm already on it. Don't talk to anyone. Don't respond to any media requests. And whatever you do, don't let Grace leave the house today. Why not? Because right now, she's the story. If she's seen in public, she'll be photographed. She'll be followed. Every move she makes will be scrutinized and twisted into something it's not. This is insane. This is media Marcus and money and race, all mixed together into a toxic cocktail that sells papers and destroys lives. We need to get ahead of this before it gets worse. How can it get worse? The answer came 4 hours later. A woman from Child Protective Services showed up at the front door. Marcus saw her through the window before she rang the bell. A middle-aged woman in a gray suit carrying a clipboard, her face carefully neutral. He opened the door before she could knock. "Mr. Wellington, I'm Sandra Collins from the Department of Children and Family Services. I need to ask you some questions about the welfare of your children." Marcus felt the floor shift beneath his feet. "On what basis?" "We received a complaint, anonymous, alleging that your children may be in an unsafe environment." "That's absurd." "I understand this is difficult, Mr. Wellington, but I'm required to investigate all complaints regardless of their source. May I come in?" Marcus wanted to slam the door in her face, wanted to call Andrew, wanted to scream that this was all a lie orchestrated by people who couldn't stand to see a black woman caring for white children. But he knew better. He knew that anything he said or did would be used against him. "Of course, please come in." Sandra Collins spent 3 hours in his home. She interviewed the boys separately, asking them gentle questions about Grace, about their father, about how they felt. She interviewed Grace, asking about her background, her qualifications, her relationship with the children. She interviewed Marcus, asking why he'd hired Grace, how much time she spent with the children, whether there had ever been any incidents of concern. And through it all, Marcus felt like he was walking on glass. Every word mattered. Every pause could be misinterpreted. Every look could be turned into evidence of something sinister. When it was finally over, Sandra Collins stood in the foyer making notes on her clipboard. "Mr. Wellington, I want to be honest with you. Based on what I've seen today, I don't observe any signs of abuse or neglect. Your children appear healthy, happy, and well cared for. Miss Thompson seems professional and genuinely caring." Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "However," Sandra continued, "the complaint will remain on file. If we receive additional complaints, we'll be required to investigate again. I recommend that you document everything. Keep records of Miss Thompson's duties, her hours, her interactions with the children, in case this happens again." In case, Sandra met his eyes. There was something like sympathy in them. "These situations can escalate quickly, Mr. Wellington. Someone out there wants to hurt you, and they're willing to use your children to do it. Be careful." She left. Marcus closed the door and leaned against it, his legs suddenly weak. Grace appeared in the hallway. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "She's gone. She's gone." What did she say? That there's no evidence of abuse, that the boys are fine. Grace's shoulders sagged with relief, but it was short-lived. "This isn't going to stop, is it?" Marcus shook his head. "Someone is targeting us. Someone with enough connections to get that article published and enough malice to call CPS. This is organized, deliberate." Who would do this? Marcus thought about Camille Whitworth, her knowing smile, her pointed questions, her thinly veiled threats. "I have an idea." That evening, Marcus made some calls, not to his lawyer, not to his PR team, to people he'd helped over the years. People who owed him favors. People who knew things. By midnight, he had answers. The anonymous complaint to CPS had been traced to a burner phone purchased in Menlo Park. The photographs in the article had been taken by a freelance photographer who refused to reveal his client, but who had been seen having dinner with Preston Whitworth 2 days before the article ran. And the source close to the family quoted in the article the phrasing matched language used in private communications meant between Camille Whitworth and the editor of the Observer Society section. It was all connected, all orchestrated. Camille Whitworth had decided to destroy Grace, and she was using every weapon at her disposal. Marcus sat in his office staring at the evidence, his mind racing. He could fight back. He had resources, connections, lawyers who could bury the Whitworths in litigation for the next decade. But that would take time. And every day this continued, Grace suffered. The boys suffered. Their fragile new happiness was being dismantled piece by piece. There had to be another way. His phone rang. Eleanor. "I saw the article," she said without preamble. "It's disgusting." "I know." "And the CPS visit. How are the boys confused, scared? They don't understand why strangers are asking them questions about Grace." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For doubting her, for doubting you. When I first came to visit, I was ready to demand you fire her. I thought she was trying to replace Victoria, but I was wrong." "Yes, you were. I've been watching from a distance these past few weeks. I've seen the way those boys have come back to life, the way they laugh now, the way they talk about their mother without falling apart. That woman did that. Grace did that." Marcus's throat tightened. "I know she did. So what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to fight." How could Marcus thought about the evidence he'd gathered, the connections he'd traced, the truth he now knew. I'm going to tell the truth, publicly, before they can spin any more lies. That's risky. Not as risky as staying silent. Eleanor was quiet again. Then do it, and Marcus, make them regret ever coming after your family. The next morning, Marcus called his PR team. I want to schedule an interview. National media, the biggest platform we can get. His PR director, Jennifer, hesitated. Sir, are you sure the usual strategy is to stay quiet? Let these things blow over. This isn't going to blow over. Someone is actively trying to destroy my family. I'm not going to hide while they do it. What do you want to say? Marcus took a deep breath. The truth. The interview was scheduled for that Friday. 3 days away. 3 days of hell. More articles appeared. More anonymous sources. More insinuations. The story spread from local gossip sites to national tabloids. Marcus Wellington, the grieving billionaire. Grace Thompson, the mysterious homemaker. The children caught in the middle. Comment sections filled with hatred. People who'd never met Grace called her a gold digger, a home wrecker, a predator. People who'd never met Marcus called him naive, foolish, a disgrace to his dead wife's memory. Grace stopped eating. She barely slept. She spent every moment with the boys, holding on to them like they might be taken away at any second. Because they might be. On Wednesday night, Marcus found her in the guest cottage packing a suitcase. His heart stopped. What are you doing? Grace didn't look up, just kept folding clothes with shaking hands. I have to go, Marcus. I can't stay here anymore. Grace, no. We talked about this. That was before CPS, before the articles, before the whole world decided I was a monster. You're not a monster. You're the best thing that's happened to this family. Grace finally looked at him. Her eyes were hollow, defeated. Your sons got rejected from school because of me. You had government officials in your home because of me. Your wife's memory is being dragged through the mud because of me. Because of Camille Whitworth, not you. It doesn't matter who started it. What matters is who's getting hurt. And it's not me, Marcus. It's your boys. It's their future. It's everything you've built. She turned back to her suitcase, shoving clothes inside without folding them now. I should have known better. I should have kept my distance. I should have just done my job and nothing more. But I didn't. I let myself love them. I let myself... She stopped. Her shoulders shook. Marcus crossed the room and grabbed her wrist, stopping her hands. Let yourself what? Grace looked up at him. Tears were streaming down her face. I let myself hope. For the first time since Lily died, I let myself believe that maybe I could have a family again. That maybe I could belong somewhere. You do belong. You belong here. With us. No, Marcus, I don't. Look at what's happening. Look at what they're saying. A black woman doesn't get to walk into a white billionaire's life and become part of his family. That's not how the world works. Then the world needs to change. The world doesn't change for people like me. It crushes us. She pulled her wrists free and reached for more clothes. Marcus stood there watching her pack, feeling everything he cared about slipping through his fingers. Then he did something he hadn't done since Victoria died. He fought. Grace, stop.
My dear.
His voice was different now, harder, the voice he used in boardrooms when millions of dollars were on the line. Grace paused. I said stop. She turned to face him, her eyes wide. I am not going to let you walk out of this house. I'm not going to let you abandon my sons. And I'm not going to let a bunch of small-minded racists destroy what we've built together. Marcus, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're scared. You're hurt. You're tired of fighting a world that seems determined to tear you down. I understand all of that. But running away isn't going to make it better. It's just going to prove them right. Prove who right? Everyone who says you don't belong here. Everyone who says a black woman can't be loved by a white family. Everyone who says grief is a permanent sentence and happiness is only for certain people. Grace stared at him. If you leave now, they win. Camille Whitworth wins. Every person who wrote a hateful comment wins. Every coward who hides behind anonymous sources wins. Is that what you want? Of course not. Then stay. Fight with me. Let me tell the world the truth about who you are. What truth they've already made up their minds. Not everyone. There are still people who want to believe in love, in second chances, in families that don't look like what they expected. Let me show them that we're real. Grace's resolve wavered. He could see it in her eyes. What about the boys? What if this makes things worse for them? The boys love you, they need you, and they're stronger than you think. We all are. Grace looked at the suitcase, at the clothes spilling out of it, at the evidence of her almost escape. Then she looked at Marcus. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, I am too." "What if it doesn't work? What if we fight and we still lose? Then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll be able to look the boys in the eye and tell them we didn't give up." Grace was silent for a long moment. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know how to do this, Marcus. I don't know how to fight the whole world." Marcus sat beside her. He took her hand in his. "You don't have to fight alone. That's what family means." Grace looked at their intertwined hand, her dark skin against his pale skin, the contrast that had caused so much hatred, so much pain, but also so much healing. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll stay." Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly." "I know. And no matter what happens, no matter what you say in that interview, some people are never going to accept us." "I know that too." "Then why are you doing this?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had walked into his broken life and put the pieces back together. This woman who had given his sons their childhood back. This woman who had taught him how to hope again. Because some things are worth fighting for. Friday morning arrived like a storm. Marcus put on his best suit. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because armor comes in many forms. The interview was scheduled for 10 o'clock. National broadcast. Millions of viewers. The biggest audience he'd ever faced. Grace helped the boys get dressed in matching outfits. She brushed their hair, straightened their collars, whispered encouragements in their ears. They were coming to the interview too. Marcus had insisted. "They need to see us fight for them, Haku," he'd told Grace. "They need to know that their family is worth defending." At 9:30, the car arrived to take them to the studio. Grace held Marcus's hand the entire ride. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. At the studio, they were led to a green room. Coffee and pastries sat untouched on a table. A makeup artist touched up Marcus's face while the boys sat quietly on a couch, their eyes wide with wonder at all the equipment and people. At 9:55, a producer came to get them. 5 minutes, Mr. Wellington. Are you ready?" Marcus looked at Grace, at his sons, at the family he was about to fight for. "Yes." The studio was bright, hot, cameras everywhere. The host, a veteran journalist named Diane Foster, sat in a chair across from two couches clearly meant for Marcus and his family. They took their seats, the boys between Marcus and Grace. A united front. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. "Good morning, America. I'm Diane Foster. Today we have an exclusive interview with tech billionaire Marcus Wellington. In recent weeks, Mr. Wellington has been at the center of a media firestorm involving his children, his late wife, and his family's homemaker, Grace Thompson. He's here to tell his side of the story." Diane turned to Marcus. "Mr. Wellington, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. Let's start with the basics. Your wife, Victoria, passed away almost a year ago. How have you and your sons been coping?" Marcus took a breath. "Honestly, we almost didn't cope. After Victoria died, my sons stopped talking, stopped playing, stopped being children, and I was so lost in my own grief that I couldn't help them. I failed them completely." "That sounds incredibly difficult." "It was the worst time of our lives, and then Grace came." He looked at Grace. She was watching him with tears in her eyes. "Grace Thompson didn't just save my sons, she saved me. She walked into a house full of ghosts and brought it back to life. She got on her hands and knees and played with my children when they'd forgotten how to play. She held them through nightmares. She let them talk about their mother when everyone else, including me, was too afraid to hear it." The photos that have circulated show a very close relationship between Miss Thompson and your children. Some have questioned whether that closeness is appropriate. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Let me be very clear about something. There is nothing inappropriate about love. There is nothing inappropriate about a woman caring for children who desperately need caring. The only thing inappropriate here is the racism and prejudice that has turned a beautiful thing into a scandal." Diane leaned forward. "You're saying this is about race?" "Of course it's about race. Grace is black, my children are white, and for some people that's unforgivable. They see a black woman in my home caring for my children and they assume the worst. They call CPS, they spread lies. They try to destroy her because they can't accept that love doesn't have a color." The studio was silent. "Miss Thompson," Diane turned to Grace. "What do you want people to know?" Grace's voice was steady despite the tears on her face. I want them to know that I lost my own daughter 3 years ago. Leukemia. She was 4 years old. Her name was Lily. She held up her silver locket. The camera zoomed in. When I started caring for Ethan, Lucas, and Noah, I wasn't trying to replace their mother. I wasn't trying to insert myself into their family. I was just trying to help children who were hurting the way I was hurting, because I know what it's like to have your whole world destroyed. I know what it's like to think you'll never be happy again. She looked at the boys. These children gave me hope. They taught me that love doesn't have to end when someone dies. It can grow. It can change. It can become something new and beautiful even in the middle of grief. Ethan reached over and took Grace's hand. "We love Grace," he said, his small voice carrying across the studio. "She's not a bad person. She's the best person we know." Lucas nodded. "She makes us laugh. She doesn't get mad when we miss Mommy." Noah looked directly at the camera. "Grace is our family, and family means nobody gets left behind." Marcus felt tears spill down his own face. He didn't bother wiping them away. Diane was visibly moved. "Mr. Wellington, what do you say to the people who claim this relationship is about something other than caring for your children?" Marcus looked directly into the camera. "I say they're wrong. I say their hatred says more about them than it does about us. And I say that anyone who tries to tear apart a family that's finally found happiness again should be ashamed of themselves." He paused. "Grace Thompson is not after my money. She's not trying to replace my wife. She's a woman who lost everything and still found the strength to help 3 little boys who had lost everything too. That's not scandal. That's grace. Real grace. The kind the world needs more of." The interview ended. As they walked off set, Marcus's phone was already buzzing with calls, texts, notifications. He ignored them all, because Grace was looking at him with something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Hope. Real hope. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Marcus believed they might actually make it through. But across town, in a mansion overlooking the bay, Camille Whitworth was watching the same interview, and she was not done fighting, not by a long shot. The interview changed everything overnight. Within 12 hours, the clip had been viewed over 20 million times. Within 24 hours, it was trending on every social media platform in the country. Within 48 hours, the narrative had completely shifted. Marcus woke up on Sunday morning to find his phone flooded with messages. Hundreds of them. Thousands. From strangers, from colleagues, from people he hadn't spoken to in years. All of them saying the same thing. "We believe you. We support you. We're with you." Grace came into the kitchen that morning with tears already in her eyes. "Have you seen the comments?" Marcus nodded. He'd been reading them for 2 hours. People are sharing their own stories. Blended families. Interracial couples. Children who found love after loss. There are so many of them, Marcus. So many people who understand. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt something other than fear. He felt hope. But the real shift came at 9 o'clock that morning when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized immediately. Preston Whitworth. Marcus answered with cold silence. "Marcus." Preston's voice was tight, uncomfortable. "We need to talk." "Do we—" "Listen, I know things have been complicated, but Camille went too far. I didn't know she was behind all of this until I saw the interview, the CPS call, the articles. I had no idea. And yet you had dinner with the photographer who took those pictures of my home." Silence on the other end. "Marcus, I swear to you I didn't know what he was going to do with them. Camille told me he was taking photos for a society piece, something positive about families in Palo Alto." "And you believed that," Preston sighed heavily. "I believe my wife. That was my mistake." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "Your mistake almost destroyed my family. Your mistake brought government officials into my home to question my children. Your mistake made a woman who saved my sons' lives think she had to leave. I know, and I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it, Preston." "Then tell me what I can do to make this right." Marcus thought for a long moment. "I want Camille to issue a public apology. I want her to admit she orchestrated the campaign against Grace. And I want every person she contacted to know that she lied." That's asking a lot. "That's asking for the truth. If you can't deliver that, then we have nothing more to discuss." Preston was quiet for a long time. "I'll talk to her. I can't promise anything, but I'll try." "Don't try. Do." Marcus hung up. Grace was watching him from across the kitchen. "What did he say?" "He claims he didn't know what Camille was doing." "Do you believe him?" "I believe he's scared. The interview exposed his wife as a bigot. His stock is probably dropping as we speak. Men like Preston Whitworth only apologize when it's good for business. Grace sat down heavily at the table. So it's not really over. Not yet, but the tide is turning, and that matters. The boys came thundering down the stairs, still in their pajamas, their faces bright with the oblivious joy of childhood. Daddy, Grace, there are people outside. Marcus's blood went cold. What kind of people? With cameras and signs, they're waving at us. Marcus moved quickly to the front window. His heart was pounding, but what he saw wasn't what he expected. There were about 30 people gathered at the end of his driveway. Some had cameras, yes, but others held signs. Handmade signs with messages written in marker. We stand with Grace. Love is not a scandal. Family is family. Thank you for your courage. Marcus felt his eyes burn. Grace came up beside him. When she saw the crowd, her hand flew to her mouth. Marcus? I see it. Those people, they came here for us. They came here for you. One of the people in the crowd saw them in the window. She pointed and waved. Others joined in, clapping, cheering, holding their signs higher. The boys pressed their faces against the glass. Who are they, Daddy? They're friends, buddy. People who care about our family. Can we go say hi? Marcus looked at Grace. She nodded slowly. Yeah, let's go say hi. They walked outside together. The moment the crowd saw them, the cheering intensified. People surged forward, reaching out to shake hands, to offer hugs, to press small gifts into their arms. An older woman with silver hair and dark skin grabbed Grace's hands. I'm 73 years old, she said, tears streaming down her face. I raised 5 white children after their mother died in a car accident. Their father married me when it wasn't legal in half the states. People said terrible things. But we made it. We made it because love is stronger than hate. And you're going to make it too. Grace was crying too hard to respond. She just hugged the woman tight. A young man approached Marcus. Mr. Wellington, I grew up in foster care. No one wanted me because I was black and had behavioral issues. But a white family took me in when I was 12. They saved my life. What you're doing for that woman, showing the world that families don't have to look a certain way, you're changing things for kids like me. Thank you. Marcus shook his hand, his own eyes wet. Thank you for coming. The boys were being lifted up by strangers passed around like little celebrities. They were laughing, waving, completely unaware of the significance of the moment. For 2 hours, Marcus and Grace stayed outside with the crowd, listening to stories, accepting gratitude, feeling for the first time that they weren't alone. When the crowd finally dispersed, Marcus and Grace walked back into the house hand in hand. Neither of them had to say anything. Everything had changed. Monday morning brought another surprise. Marcus's assistant, Rebecca, called him at 8 o'clock. Sir, you have a visitor. She says it's urgent. Who is it? Rebecca hesitated. Camille Whitworth. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Tell her I'm not interested. She says she wants to apologize, publicly. She has reporters with her. Marcus was silent for a moment. She brought reporters. 2, from the Chronicle and the Observer. She says she wants to do this on camera. Marcus thought quickly. This could be a trap. Another manipulation, another attempt to twist the narrative. But it could also be real. Send her to the living room. I'll be down in 5 minutes. He found Grace in the kitchen. Camille is here. She wants to apologize publicly. Grace's face went pale. Do you trust her? No, but I need to hear what she has to say. Should I be there? Marcus nodded. This is about you. You deserve to face her. They walked to the living room together. Camille Whitworth was standing by the window, her back straight, her face carefully composed. She looked older than she had at the gala. The past few days had clearly taken a toll. 2 reporters stood nearby, one with a camera, one with a notebook. When Camille saw Grace, something flickered across her face. Shame, maybe. Or fear. Miss Thompson, thank you for agreeing to see me. Grace said nothing, just stood beside Marcus, her chin raised. Camille took a breath. I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. What I did was wrong. I let my prejudice guide my actions, and I hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt. She looked at Marcus. I told myself I was protecting Victoria's memory, that I was looking out for your children. But that was a lie I told myself to justify behavior that was inexcusable. Marcus kept his face neutral. Why the change of heart? The interview, watching those children talk about Miss Thompson, watching you defend your family, it made me realize that I was the monster in this story, not her. She turned back to Grace. You lost your daughter. And instead of recognizing your pain, instead of seeing you as a mother who understood grief, I saw only the color of your skin. I made assumptions based on nothing but prejudice, and then I tried to destroy you. Tears were forming in Camille's eyes now. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I can never undo what I did, but I want to try to make it right. That's why I asked the reporters to come, so everyone can hear me say it. She looked directly at the camera. I, Camille Whitworth, orchestrated a campaign of harassment against Grace Thompson. I planted stories in the media. I encouraged anonymous complaints to Child Protective Services. I tried to destroy a woman whose only crime was loving 3 children who needed her. She paused, her voice breaking. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The room was silent. Grace stepped forward slowly. Do you know what the hardest part was? Camille shook her head. Watching those boys worry that I was going to leave them. Watching them try to protect me from their own father because they thought he might send me away. Watching them afraid to love me because they knew the world was against us. Camille winced. I didn't think about the children. No, you didn't. You thought about yourself, about your opinions, about what made you comfortable. And you used 3 little boys as weapons in your war. Grace's voice was steady, now strong. I accept your apology, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because holding on to anger would poison me, and I've had enough poison in my life. She stepped back to Marcus's side. Now please leave our home. Camille nodded once. She walked to the door, the reporters following. At the threshold, she paused. For what it's worth, Miss Thompson, I was wrong about you. You're exactly the kind of person those boys need. Then she was gone. The reporters lingered. Mr. Wellington, can we get a statement? Marcus looked at Grace. We've already said everything that needs to be said, but you can print this. Our family is stronger than hate, and we're just getting started. The apology aired that night on every major network. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Camille Whitworth became the most hated woman in Silicon Valley. Within a week, she had resigned from every charity board she sat on. Preston Whitworth issued his own apology and made a substantial donation to organizations supporting interracial families. The school that had rejected the triplets called with a groveling reversal. Marcus hung up on them. Other schools called too. Better schools. Schools that said they would be honored to have the Wellington boys. But the most significant call came on Thursday afternoon. Eleanor. I just saw the Whitworth woman's apology. Everyone did. Good. She deserved to be humiliated. Marcus almost smiled. I agree. Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it from me before you hear it from anyone else. What is it? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. I spoke to a lawyer last week. Before the interview, before any of this, I was considering filing for custody of the boys. Marcus's blood went cold. You what? I was scared, Marcus. I thought Grace was manipulating you. I thought she was trying to replace Victoria. I thought I was protecting my grandchildren. By taking them from their father. I know how it sounds, but you have to understand, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was grieving, I was afraid, and I was wrong. Marcus couldn't speak. The betrayal cut too deep. The lawyer told me I didn't have grounds, that you were clearly a fit parent, that the children showed no signs of neglect or abuse. He actually told me that the way the boys talked about Grace suggested she was exactly what they needed. So you stopped because a lawyer told you you'd lose, not because you realized you were wrong. No, I stopped because of the interview, because I saw those children holding Grace's hands, because I heard them say she was family, and I realized that fighting against that would only hurt them more. Marcus closed his eyes. Eleanor, I don't know what to say to you right now. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. And I wanted to tell you that I'm done fighting. Grace isn't the enemy. She never was. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure I never forget that. The line went dead. Marcus sat in his office for a long time, processing what Eleanor had told him. She had almost tried to take his children, his mother-in-law, the grandmother who claimed to love them. Fear made people do terrible things, but so did love. He found Grace in the garden with the boys. They were planting flowers, Victoria's favorites. Grace looked up when she heard him approach. Is everything okay? Eleanor called. What did she want? Marcus hesitated. To apologize for a lot of things. Grace studied his face. There's more, I can tell. Later. Right now I just want to be here. With you. With them. He sat down on the grass beside his sons. Lucas immediately crawled into his lap. Noah leaned against his side. Ethan kept planting, but kept glancing over with a small smile. Grace watched them, her eyes soft. "This is what I always wanted," she said quietly. "This moment, right here. A family that feels like home." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "This is just the beginning." That night, after the boys were asleep, Marcus and Grace sat in the library together. It had become their routine. The quiet hours when the house was still and they could just be themselves. "I have to tell you something," Marcus said. Grace looked up from her book. "That sounds serious." "It is, but it's also good, I think." He set down his coffee and faced her. "I've been working on something for a few weeks now. I wanted to wait until all this chaos was over, but now I can't wait anymore." Grace closed her book slowly. "What is it?" "Victoria always wanted to do something meaningful with her life. Not just raise our children, but help other families too. She had this dream of creating a place where families going through crisis could find support. A foundation. Something that would last." Grace's eyes widened. "I never had the courage to do it. After she died, I couldn't even think about her dreams without falling apart. But then you came, and you showed me that her dream didn't have to die with her." Marcus pulled out a folder from beside his chair. "I've been meeting with architects, lawyers, financial planners. I'm creating a foundation, a residential care facility for families with children undergoing cancer treatment, a place where they can stay together, get counseling, find community." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "And I want to name it after both of them, Victoria and Lily, the Victoria and Lily Foundation." Grace was shaking now. Tears were streaming down her face. "Marcus, I can't do it without you, Grace. You know what these families need. You've lived it. This is your calling, and I want you to run it with me, not as an employee, as a partner." He handed her the folder. Inside were official documents, co-director of the foundation, equal partnership, and beneath that something else. Guardianship papers. "If anything ever happens to me," Marcus said, his voice rough, "I want you to be their legal guardian. You already are in every way that matters. This just makes it official." Grace stared at the papers, her hands trembling. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Marcus moved closer to her. "Because you're not just important to my sons. You're important to me, and I don't want to imagine a life without you in it." Grace looked up at him. Their faces were inches apart. "Marcus, I'm not asking you to replace Victoria. I'm not asking you to forget Lily. I'm asking you to help me build something that honors them both. Something that turns our grief into hope. For other families. For our family." Grace was crying too hard to speak. She just nodded over and over, clutching the papers to her chest. Marcus reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." And then for the first time since they'd met, Marcus did something he'd been wanting to do for weeks. He kissed her, not passionately, not desperately, just softly, gently, a promise of things to come. When they pulled apart, Grace was smiling through her tears. What do we tell the boys? The truth, that their family just got a little bigger. The next morning, Marcus gathered everyone in the living room. The boys sat on the couch, still in their pajamas, looking curious and slightly nervous. Grace sat beside them, her eyes still red from crying happy tears. Marcus knelt in front of his sons. "Boys, I have something important to tell you. Something good." Ethan's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Is it about school?" "No, it's about Grace." All three boys immediately looked at her, then back at their father. "Is she leaving?" Noah whispered, his voice tight with fear. "No, buddy, just the opposite. I'm asking Grace to stay with us, forever, as part of our family." The boys stared at him. Like a mommy?" Lucas asked carefully. "Not to replace your mommy. No one can ever do that. But as someone who loves you, someone who takes care of you, someone who's part of our family." Ethan was the first to react. He launched himself off the couch and threw his arms around Grace. "Finally, I've been waiting forever." Lucas and Noah were right behind him, piling onto Grace until she was buried under 3 wiggling bodies. "Does this mean we can call you Mama Grace?" Noah asked. Grace looked at Marcus, tears streaming down her face again. "Only if you want to," she said. "I want to," all 3 boys shouted at once. Marcus watched the scene, his heart fuller than it had been in over a year. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, not replacing. Just making room for new love, while honoring the old. Later that day, they drove to the cemetery together, all 5 of them. The boys placed fresh flowers on Victoria's headstone. They stood in a row, holding hands. "Hi, Mommy," Ethan said. "We have something to tell you." Daddy asked Grace to stay forever, Lucas continued. We're going to call her Mama Grace, Noah added. But we still love you the most. You're our first mommy, always. Grace stepped forward. She was wearing her silver locket. She opened it and showed the tiny photo of Lily to Victoria's headstone. I brought someone to meet you, she said softly. This is my daughter, Lily. She's in heaven with you now. I hope you're taking care of each other. She closed the locket and pressed it to her heart. Thank you for your boys. Thank you for trusting them to me. I promise I'll love them with everything I have, just like you did. Marcus put his arm around her. We're going to be okay, he said to Victoria's headstone. All of us, I promise. A gentle breeze rustled through the oak trees. The boys looked up, their faces bright. Mommy heard us, Noah whispered. I can feel it. Me too, Lucas agreed. Ethan just smiled. They stood together in the peaceful quiet of the cemetery. 5 people bound by love and loss and the courage to start again. And somewhere Marcus believed Victoria was smiling, because this was exactly what she would have wanted. Her boys surrounded by love, finding their way back to happiness, with a woman named Grace, who had taught them all that even after the darkest night, the sun could still rise. 6 months had passed since that first kiss in the library. 6 months of building, of healing, of becoming a family in ways that went beyond blood and paperwork. The Victoria and Lily Foundation was nearly complete. The east wing of the Wellington estate had been transformed into a residential care facility with 12 private suites, a play therapy center, a counseling wing, and a garden. And designed specifically for children undergoing treatment, Grace had been involved in every detail: the color of the walls, the softness of the beds, the placement of every toy in the playroom. She knew what families going through this needed because she had lived it. Marcus watched her work and fell deeper in love every day. The boys had adjusted to their new normal with the resilience only children possess. They called her Mama Grace now. Without hesitation, they fought over who got to sit next to her at dinner. They crawled into her bed when they had nightmares. And slowly, carefully, they stopped asking when their first mommy was coming home. Not because they forgot her, never that, but because they finally understood that she wasn't coming back and that it was okay to keep living in way. It was a Thursday morning in November when Marcus made his decision. He'd been carrying the ring for 3 weeks, a simple band with a yellow sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. The sapphire was the same color as the flowers Lily used to pick. The diamonds caught the light the way Victoria's eyes used to sparkle. 2 women, 2 losses, 1 ring that honored them both. He was going to ask Grace to marry him, but first he needed permission. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Marcus found Grace in the library. Their library now. The place where they'd sat in comfortable silence so many nights. The place where they'd learned to trust each other with their grief. I need to talk to you about something, he said. Grace looked up from her book. She'd been reading poetry lately. Mary Oliver. Rupi Kaur. Words about loss and love and starting over. That sounds serious. It is, but I need to do something first, before I talk to you. Grace frowned. What do you need to do? I need to visit Victoria. Understanding dawned in Grace's eyes. You're going to the cemetery. Tonight. I need to talk to her. Alone. There are things I need to say. Grace closed her book and stood. I'll stay with the boys. Marcus nodded. He walked toward the door, then stopped. Grace. Yes. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me since Victoria died. You gave my sons back their childhood. You gave me back my life, and I will never be able to thank you enough for that. Grace's eyes glistened. Marcus, you don't have to thank me. You gave me just as much. He smiled. Then he left. The cemetery was quiet at night. Marcus walked the familiar path to Victoria's grave, his footsteps the only sound in the darkness. The moon was full, casting silver light across the headstones. He stood in front of her marker for a long time, just breathing. Hey, Vic? His voice was rough. He hadn't called her that since the funeral. I know it's late. I know I usually come during the day. But I needed to talk to you when no one else was around. He took a deep breath. I'm going to ask Grace to marry me. The words hung in the cold air. I know what you're probably thinking. It's only been a year and a half. Is it too soon? Am I dishonoring your memory? Am I trying to replace you? He shook his head. The truth is, I could never replace you. You were my first love. The mother of my children, the woman who made me believe I could be more than just a guy with a computer and a dream. You changed my life, Victoria, and losing you nearly destroyed me." Tears were falling now. He didn't bother wiping them away. "But then Grace came, and she didn't try to make me forget you. She didn't try to fill the hole you left. She just stood beside it, with me, and somehow that made the hole feel less like an ending and more like a door. A door to something new." He pulled out the ring and held it up to the moonlight. "I had this made special. The yellow sapphire is for Lily, Grace's daughter. The diamonds are for you, because I want you both there, on her hand, forever." He closed his fist around the ring. "I need to know if this is okay, Vic. I need some kind of sign that you're not angry, that you want me to be happy, that you want our boys to have a complete family again." He waited. The cemetery was silent, and then so softly he almost thought he imagined it a breeze rustled through the oak trees. Leaves scattered across the ground, dancing in patterns that seemed almost intentional. One leaf landed directly on Victoria's headstone, a golden oak leaf perfect and whole. Marcus stared at it. "Is that you?" The breeze picked up again, wrapping around him like an embrace, and Marcus knew it was okay. He pressed his hand against the cold stone of her marker. "Thank you, Vic, for everything. For the boys, for the years we had, for giving me permission to love again." He stood up slowly. "I'm going to take care of them, all of them. Grace and our boys and this family we're building. I promise you, I'm going to make you proud." He walked away from the cemetery with the ring in his pocket and peace in his heart. For the first time since Victoria died, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The foundation's grand opening was scheduled for Saturday, 2 days away. Marcus had planned everything perfectly. The ceremony, the speeches, the tour of the facility, and at the end, after everyone had seen what they'd built together, he would ask Grace to marry him, in front of their family, in front of their community, in front of the world. But first, there was one more person he needed to speak to. Eleanor. He called her Friday morning. "I need to see you today. It's important." Eleanor arrived at the house by noon. She looked older than she had a year ago. Grief had aged her, but so had healing. There was a softness in her eyes now. That hadn't been there before. "What's this about, Marcus?" "I'm going to ask Grace to marry me." Eleanor stared at him for a long moment. "Tomorrow, at the foundation opening. I want her to know that this isn't just about the boys. It's about us, about our future, about building something permanent. And you're telling me because I need your blessing." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You want my blessing? You're Victoria's mother, the boy's grandmother. You're part of this family whether any of us like it or not, and I don't want to start this new chapter with tension between us." Eleanor sat down heavily in a chair. "You know I almost tried to take your children from you." "I know." "You know I said terrible things about Grace." "I know that too. And yet you're asking for my blessing." Marcus sat across from her. "Because I believe people can change. Because I believe you love those boys. And because I believe Victoria would want us to be a family, all of us." Eleanor was quiet for a long time. "She was my only child," she finally said, her voice breaking. "When she died, I thought my life was over. I couldn't see anything but the loss. I couldn't feel anything but the pain. I understand. I blamed everyone. You for not being with her that night, God for taking her, and Grace for daring to exist in the space where my daughter should have been. That's grief, Eleanor. It makes us do terrible things." "Yes, it does." Eleanor looked up at him. "But watching those boys these past months, watching them laugh and play and talk about their mother without falling apart, I realized that Grace didn't steal Victoria's place. She just made room for everyone to heal." Tears were streaming down Eleanor's face now. If Victoria could see what that woman has done for her sons, she would be grateful, she would be thankful, and she would want you to be happy. She reached out and took Marcus's hand. "You have my blessing, Marcus, for what it's worth. You have my blessing." Marcus squeezed her hand. "It's worth everything." Saturday dawned bright and clear. The kind of perfect November day that felt like a gift from the universe. The Victoria and Lily Foundation was filled with people. Donors, media, families who would be the first to use the facility. Politicians and celebrities and ordinary people who had been moved by the story of a billionaire and a homemaker who had fallen in love through grief. Marcus stood at the entrance greeting guests, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. But his eyes kept drifting to Grace. She was wearing a deep burgundy dress that made her dark skin glow. Her silver locket hung around her neck as always. Lily close to her heart. She was talking to a young mother whose daughter was starting treatment next week. The mother was crying. Grace was holding her hands, nodding, listening with the kind of attention that made people feel like they were the only person in the world. That was Grace's gift, making the invisible feel seen. Marcus loved her more in that moment than he ever had before. The ceremony began at 2 o'clock. Marcus stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. His sons were in the front row with Eleanor and Grace, all of them watching him with pride. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. "A year and a half ago, I lost my wife. Victoria was the love of my life, the mother of my 3 sons, the reason I believed in happy endings." His voice caught. He let it. "When she died, I didn't think I would survive. And for a while, I didn't. Not really. I was a ghost in my own home. My sons were drowning in grief, and I was too broken to help them." He looked at Grace. Then someone showed up who changed everything. A woman who walked into our broken home and refused to leave. A woman who played horse on her hands and knees. Who let 3 little boys talk about their mother when everyone else was too afraid to listen. Who taught us all that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. Grace's eyes were filling with tears. Grace Thompson lost her own daughter to leukemia 3 years ago. Her name was Lily. She was 4 years old. And instead of letting that loss destroy her, Grace turned it into a mission to help other families survive what she survived, to make sure no one has to grieve alone. Marcus stepped away from the podium. This foundation exists because of 2 women, Victoria, who dreamed it, and Grace, who made it real. The Victoria and Lily Foundation is a testament to their love, their loss, and their legacy. The crowd applauded. But Marcus wasn't finished. He walked down from the stage and stood directly in front of Grace. The crowd went quiet. "Grace Thompson?" She looked up at him, confusion and hope battling in her eyes. 16 months ago, you walked into my house as a homemaker. Today, you stand here as the co-director of a foundation that will change lives. But I don't want to talk about what you've done for this foundation. I want to talk about what you've done for me." He reached into his pocket. "You taught me that it's possible to love again after loss. You showed my sons that families don't have to look a certain way to be real. You held my hand in the darkness and walked with me back toward the light." He pulled out the ring. Grace gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. "This ring has a yellow sapphire for Lily and diamonds for Victoria, because I don't want you to marry me despite what we've lost. I want you to marry me because of who we've become through that loss." He got down on one knee. The crowd was completely silent. "Grace Thompson, will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Will you help me raise 3 amazing boys who already call you Mama? Will you build a life with me that honors everyone we've loved and lost?" Tears were streaming down Grace's face. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "Yes," she whispered. Marcus couldn't hear her. "What was that?" "Yes," Grace shouted, laughing through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000,000 times, yes." Marcus slid the ring onto her finger and stood up. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her while the crowd exploded into cheers. The boys rushed forward, throwing themselves at Grace and Marcus, wrapping their arms around both of them. "She said yes," Lucas screamed. "She said yes. We're a real family now," Noah added. Ethan just held on tight, his face buried against Grace's side, his shoulders shaking with happy tears. Eleanor stood at the edge of the crowd watching the scene with tears of her own. And somewhere Marcus believed Victoria and Lily were watching too, smiling, at peace. The reception that followed this was a blur of congratulations and photographs and happy tears. But Marcus remembered certain moments with perfect clarity. The moment Eleanor hugged Grace and whispered something in her ear that made Grace cry even harder. The moment Ethan asked if Grace was going to change her name to Wellington and Grace said she would be honored. The moment Noah announced to the entire crowd that he was going to be the ring bearer at the wedding and Lucas argued that he wanted to do it too. The moment a young mother from the foundation told Grace that she had saved her life just by existing, just by showing that it was possible to survive the unsurvivable. And the moment late in the evening when Marcus and Grace stood alone in the garden, looking at the roses they'd planted together. "I still can't believe this is real," Grace said softly. "It's real." She looked at the ring on her finger, turning her hand so the sapphire caught the fading light. "When I lost Lily, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never feel joy again. I thought the best I could hope for was survival. And now I have 3 sons who call me Mama, a man who loves me despite everything, a purpose that gives my daughter's death meaning." She looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I have more than I ever dreamed possible." Marcus pulled her close. "We're just getting started, Grace. This foundation is going to help thousands of families. Our boys are going to grow up knowing what love looks like, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives proving that hope is stronger than in grief." Grace leaned her head against his chest. "I love you, Marcus Wellington. I love you too, Grace Thompson, soon to be Wellington." They stood in the garden as the sun set, holding each other, breathing in the reality of their new life. And neither of them saw the shooting star that streaked across the sky at that exact moment. But the boys did. "Look," Ethan shouted from the window. "A shooting star! Make a wish!" Lucas yelled. Noah closed his eyes tight. "I wish Mama Grace and Daddy stay happy forever," he whispered. And somewhere in the universe, 2 little girls named Victoria and Lily were listening. The wedding took place 3 months later. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, held in the garden of the Wellington estate, surrounded by the roses they'd planted together. The boys served as ring bearers, all 3 of them walking down the aisle in matching suits, carrying the rings on velvet pillows with the serious concentration of surgeons. Eleanor sat in the front row crying happy tears, and Grace walked down the aisle on her own, because she had no one to give her away. She had built herself from the ashes of her own destruction. She had earned this moment with every tear she'd shed and every nightmare she'd survived. Marcus watched her approach, and he felt his heart swell with something beyond love, something like reverence. This woman had been through hell. She had lost her child, her marriage, her entire life. And instead of letting that destruction define her, she had risen from the rubble and built something beautiful. She was extraordinary, and she was about to become his wife. The ceremony was simple, traditional vows with personal additions. "I, Marcus, take you, Grace, to be my wife, to love you in the presence of our children, to honor you in the presence of Victoria's memory, to cherish you for the rest of my days. You came into my life when I was broken, and you put me back together piece by piece. I promise to spend every day of our marriage doing the same for you." Grace was crying too hard to speak at first. She had to take 3 deep breaths before she could begin. "I, Grace, take you, Marcus, to be my husband, to love your sons as my own, to honor Victoria's memory and Lily's legacy, to build a future that makes room for all we've lost and all we've found. You saw me when I was invisible. You fought for me when the world tried to tear us apart. I promise to stand beside you through every storm, every triumph, and every ordinary day in between." The minister smiled. "By the power vested in me by the state of California, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride." Marcus kissed Grace while their sons cheered, and Eleanor sobbed, and the small crowd applauded. When they pulled apart, Grace was laughing through her tears. "We did it! We did it!" The boys rushed forward, throwing themselves at their parents. "Can we call you Mama Wellington now?" Lucas asked. Grace laughed and knelt down to hug all 3 of them. "You can call me whatever you want, baby. I'm yours forever." That night, after the reception, after the guests had left, after the boys had finally fallen asleep in a pile of exhaustion and sugar, Marcus and Grace sat on the porch of their home. Their home, not just his anymore, theirs. Grace was still in her wedding dress, her feet bare, her head resting on Marcus's shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Lily, Victoria, how strange it is that we found each other through so much loss." "Not strange, meant to be," Grace smiled. "You believe in that fate. I believe in something. Call it fate, call it God, call it the universe looking out for broken people who deserve second chances." He took her hand, feeling the ring on her finger. "I used to think my life was about building companies, making money, achieving success, but none of that mattered when Victoria died. The only thing that mattered was love, and I had forgotten how to do it. You remembered. Because of you, you reminded me." Grace lifted her head to look at him. "What happens now?" "Now we live. We raise our boys. We run the foundation. We help families who are going through what we went through, and we love each other every single day for the rest of our lives." "That sounds perfect." "It won't be perfect. There will be hard days. Days when grief sneaks back in. Days when the world is cruel. Days when we wonder if we're doing any of this right. I know, but we'll face it together. That's the only thing I know for sure." Grace leaned in and kissed him softly. "Together, I like the sound of that." They sat on the porch until the stars came out, holding hand, breathing in the quiet peace of a life rebuilt from wreckage. And in the morning, when the boys came tumbling out of their room asking for pancakes, Grace was already in the kitchen, humming softly flour on her hands, wearing one of Marcus's old shirts over her pajamas. She looked up when Marcus walked in. "Good morning, husband." "Good morning, wife." The boys made gagging noises at the kissy faces their parents were making, and Grace laughed. A real laugh. Full and bright and completely free. That sound. That laugh. It had been what started everything. The first day Marcus came home and heard his sons laughing with a woman he didn't know. Now that laughter filled every room of their home. Every day. A constant reminder that joy was possible even after the darkest night. 1 year later, the Victoria and Lily Foundation had helped over 200 families. The waiting list was 6 months long. They were breaking ground on a second facility in Boston. Grace had become a nationally recognized advocate for pediatric cancer support. She spoke at conferences, testified before Congress, and raised millions of dollars for research and family services. Marcus had stepped back from Wellington Tech to focus on the foundation and his family. His board had tried to fight him on it. He'd bought out their shares and told them to go find another company to control. Family first, everything else second. The boys were thriving. Ethan was reading at a 3rd grade level. Lucas was showing talent for music. Noah had come out of his shell completely talking more in a single day than he used to talk in a month. They still visited Victoria's grave every month. They still talked about her at dinner. They still celebrated her birthday and their parents' anniversary. She was part of their family, always would be, but so was Grace. On the 2nd anniversary of their wedding, Marcus took Grace back to the spot where he'd first seen her. The sunroom, Victoria's sunroom, now filled with toys and books and the happy mess of 3 active boys. "Remember the first day I saw you?" he asked. "How could I forget you looked at me like I was a ghost?" "I thought I was seeing things. My sons laughing, actually laughing. I didn't think that was possible anymore." Grace smiled. "They just needed someone to play with them." "They needed you?" Marcus took her hands. "We all needed you." He pulled out a small box. "Another ring?" Grace asked, laughing. "Not a ring, something else." She opened the box. Inside was a small golden pendant. On it was engraved a simple image, a mother horse with 3 small horses on her back. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "Marcus! That's how I'll always remember it. The moment everything changed. You playing horse with my sons on your back. The first time I understood that we were going to be okay." Grace was crying as he clasped the pendant around her neck beside her silver locket. "Now you have both of them, Lily and the boys, close to your heart. Always." Grace touched both pendants, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she whispered, "more than I ever thought I could love anyone again. I love you too, forever." And at that exact moment, 3 boys came crashing into the room. "Mama, Daddy, we're hungry." Grace and Marcus looked at each other and laughed. "Welcome to our life," Grace said. "Wouldn't change a thing," Marcus replied. They walked to the kitchen together, their 3 sons running ahead, the pendants around Grace's neck catching the light. A family built from grief and grace. A love story that began with laughter and grew into something unbreakable, and a promise kept to 2 little girls named Victoria and Lily, that their legacy would live on, in every family helped, in every life saved, in every moment of joy carved out of sorrow. Because sometimes when everything falls apart, the pieces come back together in ways you never imagined. Not to erase what was lost, but to show you that love is bigger than grief, that presence is more powerful than perfection, and that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who stays, it's who heals you, it's who brings the light. And Grace Thompson Wellington, standing in her kitchen, surrounded by the people who loved her, wearing the memories of her daughter and her stepsons against her heart, finally understood something she had spent 3 years trying to learn. She had not just survived her grief, she had transformed it into purpose, into love, into a life that honored everyone she had lost while embracing everyone she had found. That was grace, real grace, the kind that saves, the kind that heals, the kind that lasts forever. And as Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to her temple while their sons argued about pancake toppings, Grace Thompson Wellington made a silent promise to the universe. She would never waste a single moment of this second chance, not one, because she knew better than most how quickly it could all be taken away. And she also knew something else, something it had taken her years of grief and months of healing to finally understand. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It just finds new ways to grow, and grow, and grow, forever.